Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are going deep on continuous improvement.
That's right.
We are talking all about Kaizen.
Kaizen.
We are diving into Kaizen Mastery by Steve M. Beauchamp. Um,
Excellent book.
yeah, and really trying to get to the bottom of not just what Kaizen is, but how we can apply it,
Mm.
in practical ways.
Absolutely. And it's one of those concepts that it sounds very simple on the surface, right? Continuous improvement. But when you really get into the nuances and the philosophy behind it, there's a lot more to uncover. And this book does a fantastic job of kind of breaking it all down, making it accessible and giving you real world examples of how it's been applied successfully.
And I love that it's not just for businesses. I
Right.
mean, obviously it has its roots in, manufacturing and things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm already seeing like how I can apply this to, my personal life, to my hobbies, to pretty much anything I'm working on.
It's a mindset shift
Yeah.
more than anything.
So let's talk about that. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of Kaizen.
Yeah.
So the book kicks off with this really compelling story about a small manufacturing company in Japan
Yeah.
that was really struggling in the 1950s. They were on the brink of failure. Debts were piling up. Morale was low, like the whole nine yards. And they decided to try something kind of radical at the time,
Right.
Kaizen.
Yeah, and this is right after World War II, so you can imagine Japan is really trying to find its footing again,
Right.
rebuild its industries, and there's this sense of urgency,
Yeah.
this need to be more efficient to compete on a global scale.
Yeah.
And Kaizen emerges as this kind of homegrown solution.
So what were they doing differently? I mean, were they just like making small tweaks here and there? It doesn't seem like that would be enough to like save a company from going under.
That's what's so counterintuitive about it, right? You would think you need these massive sweeping changes to turn things around. But Kaizen is all about focusing on those small continuous improvements.
Right.
It's about recognizing that even minor adjustments, when made consistently, can have a huge impact over time.
Okay. I'm starting to see how that could add up.
And you know what's interesting? This wasn't just some random company. This was Toyota. And their success with Kaizen is actually what put them on the map. It became a cornerstone of their philosophy. And they're still known today as one of the most efficient and innovative companies in the world. So clearly there's something to this approach.
Okay, so Toyota, huge success story.
Yeah.
But what are the core principles that made such a difference for them and for countless other companies and individuals who have embraced Kaizen?
Yeah, there are really two key pillars that underpin Kaizen: continuous improvement and respect for people. And the continuous improvement part is pretty self-explanatory, right? It's the idea that we should never stop striving to do things better. There's always room for improvement, no matter how good something already is.
So it's not about being dissatisfied with what you have. It's about always seeking ways to optimize to make things better, do things smarter.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. So continuous improvement. What about this whole respect for people thing? I mean, I get it, be nice to your colleagues, but how does that tie into Kaizen?
Right. It's not just about being polite, it goes much deeper than that. Respect for people in the context of Kaizen means valuing the contributions of everyone in the organization,
Okay.
from the CEO to the frontline workers. Everyone has unique insights and ideas that can help drive improvement.
So it's about creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to speak up, to share their ideas, to suggest improvements without fear of being shut down.
Exactly, because oftentimes the people who are closest to the work, the ones who are actually doing the tasks day in and day out, they have the best insights into how things can be improved.
It makes sense when you put it that way. And again, thinking back to Toyota, I mean, they're famous for this. Like any employee on the assembly line can pull a cord if they see a problem and stop the entire production line.
That's a great example. It really demonstrates that deep respect for people and that understanding that everyone has the potential to contribute to improvement. And it's not just about empowering employees, it's also about creating an environment where they feel valued and respected. And research shows that when people feel valued and respected, they're more engaged, they're more motivated, and they're more likely to go the extra mile.
So it's a win-win for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got these two core principles: continuous improvement, respect for people.
Right.
But let's be real for a second.
Yeah.
How does this translate to like a Western context?
Right.
Because our work cultures are often very different from Japan's.
That's a really important point, and the book does acknowledge that cultural differences can create challenges when implementing Kaizen in Western organizations. But it also emphasizes that the core principles are universal. It's about adapting the approach to fit your specific culture and context.
So it's not about trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly. It's about understanding the essence of Kaizen and then figuring out how to make it work for you.
Okay, so what are some of the key things that we need to consider when we're trying to apply these principles in a Western setting?
One of the biggest mindset shifts is moving away from a results-oriented approach to a more process-oriented approach.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that. What's the difference between results-oriented and process-oriented?
Well, in a traditional Western business setting, we tend to be very focused on hitting those targets, those numbers, those bottom line results. And that's important, of course. But Kaizen encourages us to shift our focus to the process,
Okay.
to understand that if we continuously improve the process, the results will naturally follow.
So instead of just fixating on the end goal, we need to look at how we're getting there.
Exactly. It's about breaking down those big goals into smaller steps and then
Mm.
constantly looking for ways to refine and optimize each step of the way. So let's say your goal is to increase sales.
Okay, classic business goal.
Right. A results-oriented approach might focus on pushing your sales team harder to close more deals. Offering incentives, maybe even putting a little bit of pressure on them. But a process-oriented approach would look at the entire sales process, from lead generation to qualification to closing the deal, and identify areas where small changes could lead to more efficient and effective results.
So instead of just yelling, sell more,
Right.
we're looking at how can we make the process of selling smoother? How can we equip our salespeople with better tools and training? How can we remove any roadblocks that are hindering their performance?
Exactly. It's about working smarter, not harder. And there's actually a lot of psychological research that supports this idea. Studies have shown that teams that focus on process improvement tend to be less stressed and more innovative because they have a greater sense of control and purpose.
That makes sense.
It's empowering to know that you have the ability to influence the outcome by constantly tweaking and refining the way you do things.
I'm starting to see how powerful this can be. So we've got this mindset shift from results to process. But how do we actually start implementing these principles in a practical way? Like, what are some concrete steps we can take to make this a reality?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's what we'll be diving into next. The book provides a wealth of practical examples and strategies for making Kaizen work for you.
Awesome. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work.
Let's do it. All right, so let's get down to the practical stuff. How can our listeners actually use Kaizen?
Yeah, I'm ready to ditch the theory and get into some action.
Well, the great thing about Kaizen is that it can be applied to pretty much anything.
Okay.
Whether you're trying to be more productive at work, learn a new language, get in shape train for a marathon.
So it's not just about business.
No, not at all. It's really a philosophy you can use anywhere.
Okay, so how do we get started?
Remember those small, continuous improvements?
Mm-hmm.
Those are key.
Okay.
Instead of trying to change everything at once, focus on one small area.
So no more crazy New Year's resolutions where I try to do a million things at once.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. So start small. What else?
Set realistic, achievable goals.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're trying to get better at time management, maybe you could start with something like the Pomodoro technique.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
That's where you work in like focused bursts with short breaks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a simple technique, but it can be really effective. And then once you've mastered that, you can gradually add other time management strategies. Things like time blocking or prioritizing tasks.
So it's like building a habit.
Yeah, it is.
Start small, be consistent, and gradually increase the challenge.
Exactly. Just like working a muscle, you don't start by lifting the heaviest weight.
Right. Makes sense. Anything else?
The book emphasizes the importance of creating a personal Kaizen routine.
Okay, a routine. What does that look like?
It doesn't have to be anything complicated, even just dedicating 15 minutes each day to learning something new.
Okay.
Maybe you read a few pages of a book, listen to a podcast, or take an online course.
So continuous learning.
Right.
Okay.
And not just learning, but also taking time to reflect
Reflect on what?
on your experiences, your progress, your challenges. Identify areas where you can improve.
So is that where journaling comes in?
It can be really helpful, to track your thoughts, your ideas, your progress. It helps you see patterns and make adjustments.
Okay. So we've got small steps, realistic goals, a routine for learning and reflecting. What about when I get stuck? Everyone hits those roadblocks sometimes.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that setbacks are part of the process. It's not about being perfect. It's about learning from those setbacks and using them as opportunities for growth.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake. Just learn from it and move on. Anything else?
Well, sometimes it's hard to see our own blind spots, right? So the book also talks about the importance of seeking feedback from others.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes we need an outside perspective to really see what we're missing.
Exactly. So ask trusted friends, colleagues, or mentors for their honest feedback. They might see things that you don't. And they can help you identify areas where you can improve.
So it's not just about solo self-improvement. It's also about leveraging the power of community and collaboration.
Absolutely. We can learn so much from each other. And by sharing experiences and supporting one another, we can achieve greater levels of success.
I love that.
It's about fostering a culture of continuous learning and growth.
Speaking of growth, the book also mentions the PDCA cycle as a tool for personal improvement.
Right. The PDCA cycle can be a really helpful framework.
Can you remind us what it stands for again?
Yeah, it stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act.
Okay, right. So let's say I want to start going to bed 15 minutes earlier each night.
Okay, perfect example. So first, you would plan the change right.
Okay, so I plan to go to bed 15 minutes earlier. What's next?
Then you do it. You put your plan into action,
Okay.
and then you check. You monitor your sleep quality, your energy levels to see if the change is having a positive effect.
And if it's not working?
Then you act. You adjust the plan and try again.
So it's a cycle of continuous improvement.
Exactly. And it can be applied to any area of your life.
This is awesome. I feel like I'm already brainstorming a million ways to use these principles.
That's great to hear.
But, we've been talking a lot about personal improvement.
Yeah.
But what about Kaizen in the context of leadership?
Right, let's talk about that.
I've always believed that good leadership is about more than just telling people what to do.
Absolutely. Leading with a Kaizen mindset is about creating a culture of continuous improvement where everyone feels empowered to contribute.
So it's less about being a dictator and more about being a facilitator,
And a guide.
a guide.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Leaders who embrace Kaizen, they're the ones who roll up their sleeves and work alongside their team. They're not afraid to get their hands dirty, and they're constantly looking for ways to improve processes and empower their people.
The book actually shares a really inspiring story about a leader named Kevon who took over a struggling warranty group at King County Metro.
Oh, yeah.
They were really on the verge of collapse, but he managed to turn things around by embracing Kaizen.
Yeah, it's a great example of how powerful leadership can be in creating that Kaizen culture.
So what did he do differently?
Well, instead of coming in with all these sweeping changes or trying to micromanage everything, he focused on building relationships, empowering his team to suggest improvements, and celebrating even the smallest wins.
And it worked.
Yeah, the results were incredible. The group went from being on life support to becoming a high-performing team.
Wow, that's amazing.
Hmm.
So what are some specific things that leaders can do to foster that environment of continuous improvement?
The book provides a lot of practical strategies. One of the most important is visible commitment.
Okay.
Leaders can't just talk about Kaizen, they have to walk the talk.
So leading by example.
Exactly.
Okay.
If the team sees the leader actively participating in Kaizen, they're more likely to follow suit.
Makes sense.
Anything else? Yeah, it's also really important to create a safe space for innovation. An environment where employees feel comfortable sharing their ideas without fear of judgment or criticism.
I imagine that's especially important in industries that are known for being resistant to change,
Yeah.
like manufacturing or construction.
You're absolutely right. And the book actually addresses that challenge head on. It offers some really interesting strategies for overcoming resistance to change.
Oh, that's what I want to hear about.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we deal with that resistance to change? I mean, some industries are just notorious for it.
You're right. But the book actually showcases a number of case studies where Kaizen has been successfully implemented in those tough environments, like manufacturing, construction, even finance. It's pretty inspiring to see how these principles can take root even in places where people are naturally hesitant to try new things.
One example that really caught my eye was Kraft Foods.
Yeah.
The mac and cheese singles, those guys. They had a maintenance team that was struggling with all sorts of inefficiencies and high defect rates.
Hmm.
And when they first introduced Kaizen, the team was basically like, oh, great, another management fad. This is not going to work.
It's understandable, right? I mean, people get tired of these top-down initiatives that feel like they're just going to add more work without actually making things better. But the leadership at Kraft was smart about it. They didn't just try to force it down everyone's throats. Instead, they focused on addressing the team's specific concerns and communicating the benefits of Kaizen in a way that resonated with them.
So it was less about you have to do this and more about here's how this can actually make your lives easier.
Exactly. And they also involved the skeptical employees in pilot projects, let them see firsthand how even small changes could have a big impact.
Kind of like, don't knock it till you try it.
Exactly. And that hands-on experience can be so powerful in overcoming resistance.
The book also talks about the importance of having respected leaders champion the change. When people see someone they admire embracing Kaizen, it makes them more likely to give it a shot themselves.
It's about building trust and credibility. If the team sees that the leadership is truly invested in this and not just paying lip service, then they're more likely to get on board. And the book even highlights an example from the construction industry.
Oh yeah, construction. That's got to be a tough one. I mean, we've always done it this way is practically the industry motto.
It is. But this particular firm was constantly dealing with project delays and budget overruns,
That's familiar.
and they decided to give Kaizen a try. As you might imagine, the initial reaction from the workers was less than enthusiastic,
Okay.
but the leadership was really smart about it. They involved the workers in the planning process from the very beginning. They listened to their concerns, addressed their doubts, and explained how Kaizen could actually benefit them.
So it was a collaborative approach rather than a dictatorial one?
Exactly. And they started with a small, manageable change, prefabricating walls in a warehouse. This one simple tweak significantly reduced the time and cost of on-site construction, and the workers could see the positive results right away.
And those early wins are so important. They build momentum. Show people that this actually works and start to shift that mindset from resistance to acceptance.
Absolutely. And once those initial successes started rolling in, the workers' attitudes began to change. They realized that Kaizen wasn't some abstract theory. It was a practical approach that could make their jobs easier and their projects more successful.
So it's about showing, not just telling.
Exactly. And another great example comes from Thrivent Financial. Financial services is another industry that can be pretty resistant to change.
Oh, yeah.
But Thrivent saw some pretty amazing improvements after adopting Kaizen. Initially, the staff was skeptical. They were used to doing things the traditional way and didn't see much need for change. But the leadership took a long-term approach, introduced small, manageable changes, and involved respected senior leaders to champion the process.
It seems like those are the common threads in all these success stories. A gradual approach, building trust, demonstrating the tangible benefits of Kaizen, and making people feel like they're part of the solution.
You got it. It's not about forcing change from the top down. It's about creating a culture where continuous improvement becomes ingrained in everything you do.
So what's the key takeaway for our listeners today? What's the one thing we want them to remember about Kaizen?
I think the most important thing is to remember that Kaizen is a journey, not a destination. It's about embracing that mindset of continuous improvement and recognizing that even the smallest changes, when made consistently, can lead to remarkable results.
That's a great way to put it. It's about that constant striving for excellence, both in our work and our personal lives.
Exactly. And I'd like to add one final thought. While it's not explicitly discussed in the book, I think mindfulness can play a huge role in enhancing our Kaizen efforts. By being present and aware, we can spot those subtle opportunities for improvement that we might otherwise miss.
That's a great point. It ties in perfectly with that whole Kaizen philosophy of paying attention to detail and always looking for ways to do things better.
So remember, keep those Kaizen principles in mind, embrace the power of small changes, and try to be more mindful in everything you do.
If you're looking for some practical tools to help you on your Kaizen journey, be sure to check out the PDCA workbook mentioned in Kaizen Mastery. And we'd love to hear from you. Share your Kaizen stories, your successes, your challenges. Let's keep this conversation going.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep improving.